Welcome to our podcast, The Words That Make Us.
Consider this time with us as your excuse to take a break from everything.
Every episode, we choose a word that makes us think, wonder, or dream. We read a range of texts that explore different aspects of this word.
And we let our thoughts wander. We hope that yours will too. So grab your favorite tea.
Or a beer.
And join me, Rama Shah.
And me, Tony Bailey. Let's go!
So today's episode is a follow-up from last week's episode on silence. So, how are we feeling today, Tony?
You know how it is with the male hormones. It's that sort of time. It's that time. Who knows? I might be a bit grumpy today.
Oh, okay. Well, that is actually very interesting because remember last time when we talked about silence and you brought something from the scriptures,
right.
And I promised to go and find something from the Quran as well.
Does that cause the male hormones to stop?
No, but I found something equally interesting about women. I don't know what you will think, so I'll run it by you. So When I was doing my research, I did not find anything on silence, but I found something about maybe silencing. I don't know if that's what we would call it, but here it is. It says here, and get 2 witnesses of your own men, and if there are not 2 men, then a man and 2 women, such as you choose for witnesses, so that if one of them errs, the other can remind her. So this was taken from Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 182. And what do you make of that?
It's like, if you don't have a man, you need 2 women to take their place.
Yeah.
That's a bit... I would say 4 or 5 probably would be better than... Don't you think?
Yeah, the more the merrier, I think.
That's terrible, isn't it? And so it's kind of linked to what we were talking about last week about silence not being a state but an instruction. And almost like women can't be entrusted to say anything worthy, so they must be silenced or underrepresented or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that still...
a thing?
That's a thing?
It's not anymore. I'm happy to say that it's not anymore. But to be fair, I went and looked for maybe some explanation, maybe a scientific explanation for the thing. And it's interesting because I found an article that did its best to find medical journals and brought evidence from medical journals of why this is the case. So this is something that I found. It says here from the Psychiatry in Practice, April 1983 issue. It says 40% of women suffer from premenstrual syndrome in some form, and 1 in 4 women have their lives severely disrupted by it. This is Dr. Jill Williams says this. And it says it recognizes that patients are at risk and suggests a suitable treatment for this.
Wow.
And then I found something else. It says, and this is contradictory to the first bit, and it says, from the same journal, I think the same issue even, it says, other authorities have suggested that premenstrual syndrome is a new problem, regular ovulation for 20 years or more being a phenomenon caused by civilization, medical progress, and an altered concept of the role of women, which is really fascinating in my opinion. So it kind of says, yeah, women have these hormonal issues, and that's why maybe we should have 2 women say the same thing for it to be true. And then it goes and contradicts itself, and it says that this is a new thing, which was not the case back in the time of the Quran. So I'm not sure what to make of this, to be honest.
Yeah. I find it a little bit iffy, that really. I understand the medical opinion that women may suffer from PMS, and I certainly have experience not myself, but of being in relationships with people where I could clearly tell, and there were definitely mood swings at different times of the month. But to use that as a justification for what's written in the Quran, I'm not sure that I altogether support that.
Yeah.
I mean,
I struggle with it. I'm not sure I get it myself, especially because for me personally, I never ever felt a difference in my mood, depending on my cycle or anything like that. Nobody in my life has ever pointed out that I was different, erratic, or emotional, or anything like that. So I find it difficult when people say, oh, she's PMSing, or when somebody says, oh, I'm not feeling well today because I have my period. So, but there are certainly women who feel that way when they have it. So,
but I wouldn't say that therefore means that your judgment is suddenly not relevant or is only worth half as much.
Yeah.
I mean, and there are blokes who go out on a heavy night's drinking the next day and hungover and feeling terrible. We don't give them special dispensation because of their
Absolutely.
If the two men who witnessed your accident were drinking the night before, then you need 4 of them. I mean, we don't do that for men.
I agree.
So it's a little bit condescending, isn't it?
It is a bit condescending, and I've always struggled with this bit because I felt like I am of sound mind, and I would. So I'm a person very prone to indignation.
Yeah, I've noticed that. Yeah.
If this was me, I would definitely say, you know what? I am not testifying. Go find your men find yourself some two very trustworthy men and get them to testify. So I.
But I was thinking when you were describing that about you need 2 witnesses, it shouldn't be an issue, but it is an issue. I was thinking about when in a court case they select the jury. Mm-hmm. And it's really important, depending on the nature of the case, what the makeup of the jury is going to be, and how many women and how many men.
Yeah.
And almost like the validity or the trustworthiness of the witness depends on gender is part of it, not the only thing, obviously, but class background, etc. And I could imagine an insurance company looking at the validity of a statement based on, is a woman doesn't know anything about,
is it a pregnant woman?
So they were probably stressed.
Yeah.
Which is terrible, really.
It is really terrible. It is terrible. So that was what I found. Then it reminded me of a poem that I had read by Rupi Kaur. I don't know if you know her.
I've done a bit of the old journaling with Rupi.
I like that. I've heard about her journal, and I actually was thinking about getting it and doing the little exercises that she mentions in her book.
I was quite enthusiastic about it when I got the book, because the book was really nice. But there's a lot of pages in it, so that means you've got to do a lot yourself.
I see.
So I
You gave up
stopped,
on it?
but I should. Maybe I should get back to it.
Maybe you can pick it up again. So there's a little poem where she says, and I really like this one, it says, "You tell me to quiet down because my opinions make me less beautiful, but I was not made with a fire in my belly so I could be put out. I was not made with a lightness in my tongue so I could be easy to swallow. I was made heavy, half blade and half silk, difficult to forget, but not easy for the mind to follow."
Wow. Good.
I really like this one.
Yeah.
I particularly like her describing herself half blade, half silk. I think that's perfect. I think we all need to be, especially women, there's the femininity is very important, but also this sharpness. We should not lose that edge.
No, I think it's sometimes viewed as unladylike
to have an opinion.
To show that aside.
Yeah.
But it's completely healthy to do so.
I think so too. I think it makes life interesting. Imagine if a man did all the talking in a relationship and a woman was just nodding. Chance
would be a fine thing, Rama, from my experience. That's never happened, but yes. But it's interesting. Silence in a relationship, though. So what we've just read there, is you shouldn't expect silence. You shouldn't expect consistency either. You've got the two, the blade and the silk. But how do you know what is the best balance in a relationship between silence and noise? And I think it's probably one of the biggest relationship difficulties I've had is, when is it the right time just to leave it? Mm-hmm. Don't say anything, leave it. give it time, etc. And when is it the time to tackle it? And what if you're in a relationship where the two sides have different idea of that?
Yeah.
Is that going to be disastrous?
I find that it's really communication. I'm a big fan of communication. I think that communication should always be present and we should talk about things constantly, but also not to talk things to death. I think that fine balance is really important. And also I'm a big fan of when they say don't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah.
I find that very important. So not everything is worth talking about, not worth the noise. For example, it's like, I don't know, did you hang the towel right? Or did you do this right? Is this really worth talking about? That's something I would leave. But
often talking about the small stuff is a manifestation of big stuff.
True.
That hasn't come to the surface yet. And it's easier to shout at somebody about you didn't put the toilet lid down when what actually you mean is, I hate you and I don't want to live with you anymore. Yeah, it's kind of easier to take it out on the toilet seat.
The tangible. I think it's easier to talk about the tangible stuff, even if they're little things, to say, oh, it's about the toilet seat and it's about this, where actually maybe sometimes it's a change of heart, sometimes it's resentment, sometimes it's past trauma that is actually making you act a certain way.
Almost certainly.
Exactly. And so sometimes we really have to...
Or the need to be heard or
something. Yeah.
I looked up just what would a professional counsellor say about silence, just to get a bit of guidance. So I looked at a website by Pathways Professional Counselling website. Ooh. So if they're listening, thank you so much. I'm stealing some of your material here, but your guidance on silence. And they said non-verbal communication plays a vital role in how we interact with others. It is commonly quoted that communication is 90% non-verbal communication and body language, with the remainder made up of actual words and other vocal elements. You can find different studies that quote different amounts of non-verbal communication in relationships, but regardless of which is true, we know for a fact that non-verbals play a very important role in how we communicate and perceive communication. One piece of communication that accompanies our non-verbal reactions is silence. Mm-hmm. We can convey approval, disapproval, anger, or other messages through a silent response. So it then talks a little bit about how to use healthy silence. So it says silence can be both positive or negative in our communications. And when we experience it negatively, it can take on the form of the silent treatment, which most of us have both received and delivered at some point in our lives. Yeah, tell me about it. Additionally, responding with silence when someone needs verbal validation or encouragement can be devastating to a relationship. Positive silence is necessary for strong relationships to last. Healthy silence can show a level of vulnerability and comfort within a relationship. At other times, one or both individuals may need a break from verbal communication, just being content in each other's space. Healthy silence can also be utilized when a person is angry and escalating. Simply being quiet and not escalating with the speaker can extinguish a damaging situation before it begins.
Absolutely.
So I quite liked that and thought that was quite helpful. So thank you to the professional counselling website there. But it did leave me with some questions there. What do you do when the needs of both sides are different, though?
That's a very good question, actually, because some people resort to silence when they're upset. They say to you, I just need a moment. They leave the room and they go think, and the other partner might really need to talk about it right now. Let's clear up the situation and just move on with our lives. And I tend to be the latter. I really need to talk things out. But I have come to understand that some people don't like that and they want their peace. And so I think a healthy compromise might feel like, you know what? Yes, you can have your peace. You can go and think or do whatever. But after that, can we please talk about it? Maybe when you have quietened and when I have also calmed down, it's actually healthy then. We're not reactive, but we are reflecting. And there's a big difference there. And there's no need for mean words or accusations or anything like that, where we're just sitting there to discuss something and to come to a solution. Basically, let's start with the solution rather than with the accusations.
Yeah.
So
I found that where the relationship treats silence according to one of the two parties' need, then it's going to create difficulty.
absolutely.
I've certainly been in situations where there's been some conflict about something and then the silent treatment.
Yes.
Whereas I've just wanted to, I didn't want to have an argument,
Yeah.
didn't even want to provide excuses or claim it wasn't my fault, whatever. I just wanted to understand what the problem was.
Exactly, because sometimes you don't even know what's happening.
Exactly. And so there were so many occasions in the past where I was being given the silent treatment and I didn't know why. I didn't know what it was about. I didn't really understand it. And that, rather like that, that little text indicates the feeling of helplessness that you get when you don't understand, you can't do anything about it, and you are being given the silent treatment is worse than having a flaming row. Because
Absolutely.
at least a flaming row, it gets everything out in the open.
Yeah.
And then, interestingly, a flaming row is always followed by that silence, which is everything
Have
calming down
Yeah.
again. Whereas when everything's silent, where do you go from there?
I like the expression, I really like the expression in English, the cold shoulder.
Yeah.
I really like that. When somebody gives you the cold shoulder, that is cold,
Yeah,
man.
it's not nice,
That
is
is really cold. And I find it in a way disrespectful. It's like, acknowledge my presence here. Tell me what I've done so I can actually do something about it or explain myself. Maybe I'm wrong and I'll apologize. But don't just give me the cold shoulder. That is dismissive and that is...
And it's become, maybe it's always been, but it's one of the cruelest forms of kind of bullying or, you look at, because we work with children, right? But you can spot those situations where children have been ostracized and are being given the cold shoulder, the silent treatment, nobody talks to them, they're being left out of everything. And that's really hard.
It makes you feel very small, doesn't it? It makes you feel very insignificant. It's like, you are not really even worthy of my time.
Yeah.
I'm not going to give you the time of day. And that is harsh. That is
Yeah.
really cold. And I think in any relationship, we have got to learn how to talk about our issues, and it doesn't have to be that we repeat ourselves all the time. And it doesn't have to be that we talk about the smallest things. But when something becomes a pattern, then it's really worth sitting down and talking about it.
Yeah.
And even in writing, if you're not comfortable saying things, write them down. Yeah, I'm a big fan of writing letters. It's like, okay, we live in the same house, but if I am too frazzled, I can't explain myself, then why not write you something? And then you can write me one back, and then we communicate
The good
that
thing
way.
about written communication is you can always start again and rewrite it.
Yes.
Whereas spoken, often things are said that aren't meant or aren't really what you wanted to say, or were impacted by your emotions at the time, but you can't take it back, or it's very difficult to.
Yeah. I don't know if you've heard of John Gottman. He's a psychologist, and he and his partner did really amazing work, and now everybody is talking about him, even though his work was done many years ago. And he talks about bids for connection, and he says that he was able to predict whether couples were going to make it and have a long marriage or not by the bids of connection that were acknowledged and those that were rejected.
Oh, okay.
So one example that he had was like if somebody is by the window going, "Hey dear, look at that bird," or "Look at that ship," or something, and the other one just goes, and ignores it, that is one bid for connection rejected. And so if this happens a lot, because they used to put them in a really nice apartment where there were cameras everywhere and they were like looking at these little behaviors, and they were able with very high accuracy to predict who was going to stay together and who was going to end the relationship.
That was really
interesting.
I think any couple that allows somebody to put video cameras in their home whilst they're going about their business, the chances are going to be low that their relationship will last. Interesting.
Big brother there.
And so bringing it back to silence then, you could make a claim then that for a couple, for their future success as a couple, for their longevity, they need to understand the significance of silence in their relationship.
Yes.
And they need to understand where it fits and how to tackle it. Because I can definitely say, hand on heart, that my inability to tackle silence in my previous relationship has caused it to fail.
Really? So you feel like giving people space, is that what you mean by silence?
Knowing when silence is appropriate, but also the other side of the relationship, the partner knowing that there is a need for some clarification and discussion, and that just being silent because you want to be silent isn't always the right thing to do. You know, you need to know what your partner's needs are in that as well. Because in a way, being silent is being selfish. Like you say about doing the cold shoulder. Something's happened that I'm not happy with, so I'm just going to lock myself in a room for 3 weeks and say nothing. It might satisfy your needs, but it doesn't help the other person in the relationship in any way.
Exactly. It makes them feel rejected, makes them feel small. They're not going to come back when you're ready to come out of your room and you're ready to talk again. They're not going to be the same, are they? Because
they've had several days or weeks of wondering what all of this is about, and once the imagination starts running, anything can be in there. So it can be quite damaging too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I never thought about it like that, but a bit of counselling to people might be, have you had a discussion with your partner about what to do in moments of silence, or where one of you needs silence, or how does silence play a role in your relationship in either the good moments or the bad moments?
Exactly.
It's like we touched upon last time about those wonderful moments of silence together where your partner spoils it by starting to talk about the shopping when you oh, be quiet, I want to experience.
Let's just take this moment in and
absolutely.
This reminds me of a piece, actually, one of my favorite books that I have read is written by Khalil Gibran. I don't know if you've heard of him. He was Lebanese Syrian, but he moved to America when he was young. So he was born in 1883 and died in 1931.
Really? I always thought he's one of those authors that you see his name a lot.
Everywhere, yeah.
So there's Facebook inspirational posts, memes, whatever, with his name on the bottom. I assumed that he was still alive and that he was a contemporary writer, because what he writes is quite contemporary. I
think what he writes is quite universal. It can apply to anybody at any time. That's why I really, really like his writing. And I'm not sure if this was written originally in English or in Arabic, because he wrote in both languages, but I find it really cool. So if you'll allow me to read it to you.
Yeah.
So this one is about talking. It's not about silence. So it's like there's a book called The Prophet, and the Prophet is leaving the city where he had been for a long time. But before he leaves, they gather around him, the townsfolk, and they ask him questions, and he gives them his 2 cents on each of these topics. And so this one is about talking. So this, and then a scholar said, "Speak of talking." And he answered saying, "You talk when you cease to be at peace with your thoughts. And when you can no longer dwell in the solitude of your heart, you live in your lips. And sound is a diversion and a pastime. And in much of your talking, thinking is half murdered. For thought is a bird of space, that in a cage of words may indeed unfold its wings, but cannot fly. There are those among you who seek the talkative through fear of being alone. The silence of aloneness reveals in their eyes their naked selves, and they would escape. And there are those who talk, and without knowledge or forethought, reveal a truth which they themselves do not understand. And there are those who have the truth within them, but they tell it not in words. In the bosom of such as these, the spirit dwells in rhythmic silence. When you meet your friend on the roadside or in the marketplace, let the spirit in you move your lips and direct your tongue. Let the voice within your voice speak to the ear or his ear, for his soul will keep the truth of your heart as the taste of the wine is remembered, when the color is forgotten and the vessel is no more.
Wow. Beautiful. It sort of resonates with so much of what we talked about so far. Kind of, in a way, there's a little bit of stoicism.
Yes.
A little bit of stoicism there from our previous discussion. What was that beautiful quote from last time about if you're ignorant, then
don't give us proof that you are.
Proof through your talking.
She said it much better than
better than we did. Yeah, I love that. I like the image of the bird
with
not being able to fly because it's trapped by the
insufficiency of words.
Yeah. I think that's something that I'll take away from this podcast is this idea of the insufficiency of words, because sometimes you do more harm than good by trying to express either how you feel or what you've seen or what you experience.
Absolutely.
through words. That's a beautiful piece of writing.
It is one of my favorite books, really, and I would really recommend it to you. It's really, really good, and on many different things, and maybe I'll gift it to you at some point.
Yeah. But interesting, though, that the strength of the argument about silence there comes not as an active thing, but it's about not talking as opposed to being silent.
Yes.
So it's choosing. It's a bit like the analogy of, let's bring music into it, because I like music.
Yes.
But it's a bit like, the instruction with music is sometimes it's better to take things out so that you can hear what is actually left.
Less is more.
And this idea of sort of ambient sound and ambient music, even the John Cage 4-minute 33, which is just silence, which, amongst the critics was ridiculed, but he was saying, no, you don't get the point, do you? Because you're not used to listening to nothing. And when you're listening to nothing, you are listening to something. It's the same as cutting out half the words we speak. Maybe we get greater sense and greater clarity over what we actually are saying or hearing.
So tell us about this John Cage thing. What are you referring to?
I don't know. I'm not an expert. John Cage, 1960s, I think, avant-garde composer, wrote a piece of music called 4 minutes 33. And it was just 4 minutes 33 of silence. And it was, can you believe, in concert halls, 4 minutes 33 was performed. And it's a bit like The Emperor's New Clothes, the fairy story. Yeah. A lot of reaction, about it. But I can kind of see the point he was trying to make. Obviously I wouldn't want to put it on my playlist while I'm jogging, but the point was, he said, it isn't silent. It's just not got the noise in that you expect. And when you're sitting listening to it, you can still hear the people around you breathing and the leaves in the trees rustling. And, that's all part and parcel, but you never notice those things normally.
So it's a bit of mindfulness, isn't it?
Yeah.
That you're sitting there and just observing what's happening around you, and you're being able to take it all in, and that helps us ground ourselves, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I know from my experience of trying to record music, rather like the poem that you just read, the temptation is to throw as much in there as you can. So, I'll put another beat. Put another vocal track on there and put some more, and before you know it, you can't hear anything because there's so much in there. And the original message of what you're trying to do, or the pure simplicity or the beauty of what you were trying to connect with, is completely lost. So the use of silence in the right places to clear things so that you can focus on what's really important. Yeah, I absolutely get that.
Although we did talk about that last time, about the awkward silence. I'm trying to imagine myself sitting in the concert hall and listening to nothing. I would be very confused. I'd be like, so what's happening now? And, I would be looking around, and are the other people as uncomfortable as I am? And what's really going on? I don't know if I would be able to just relax. And maybe if it was explained to me beforehand that this is what it was going to be about, then maybe. But I struggle with silence.
I'm sure there were those people who wanted to be part of the movement or whatever, who sat there in all seriousness and looked like very thoughtful, enjoying this, but didn't really understand what they were doing. And then there were cynics who just thought it was funny. But I guess I understand the point. I just don't see it as something that you would want to perform in a concert hall amongst your greatest hits, sort of thing. Oh, play it again! No, don't play it again. I'll just do a short version. Do 2 minutes 15. Yeah. So yeah, interesting. So have you got any more poetry on silence?
Yes, actually, today I have 2 more still. I don't know if we have time for both, but I would like to start with... so my favourite novel of all time is Jane Eyre.
Really?
Yeah. Do you find it dull?
I'm not a bodice ripper fan. Do you know what I mean?
No.
Bodice rippers. Yeah, that whole school of sort of romantic.
Okay.
No, not my thing.
Okay. But
I'm a Charles Dickens fan, really.
are you? Okay.
Yeah.
So this is a poem written by Charlotte Brontë, and it's about silence, and it goes like, "The human heart has hidden treasures, in secret kept, in silence sealed, the thoughts, the hopes, the dreams, the pleasures, whose charms were broken if revealed. And days may pass in gay confusion, and nights in rosy riot fly, while lost in fame's or wealth's illusion, the memory of the past may die. But there are hours of lonely musing, such as in evening silence come, when soft as birds their pinions closing, the heart's best feelings gather home. Then in our souls there seems to languish a tender grief that is not woe, and thoughts that once wrung groans of anguish now cause but some mild tears to flow. And feelings once as strong as passions float softly back, a faded dream. Our own sharp griefs and wild sensations the tale of others' suffering seem. Oh, when the heart is freshly bleeding, how longs it for that time to be, when through the mist of years receding, its woes but live in reverie. And it can dwell on moonlight glimmer, on evening shade and loneliness, and while the sky grows dim and dimmer, feel no untold and strange distress, only a deeper impulse given by lonely hour and darkened room to solemn thoughts that soar to heaven, seeking a life and world to come."
Gosh.
There's a lot
did those
there.
sisters get out much, the Brontes?
I don't think so. I think they had a rather bleak life, to be honest.
Yeah.
A lot of them died of bronchitis, and what's not the bronchitis? What's the
Brontitis.
Bronchitis.
Yeah. Tuberculosis.
Tuberculosis is the one I'm talking about. Yes. But I really do like the language that she uses. It's just very dreamy, isn't it? It's like moonlight glimmer.
It's quite gothic and sort of...
It is.
I can... dare I say it's quite feminine. Obviously comes from there. I have a problem with any poem, I have to say, that has the phrase "oh woe" in it.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a bit woe is me. But it's very, very atmospheric. And
it was written in the 1800s.
Yes.
So that was kind of the mood back then.
It was.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? It kind of indicates there being 2 layers of silence. The sort of the normal quiet silence, and then underneath that there's an even deeper silence through which real grief or real joy exists.
Takes place. Yeah. And also, they needed a lot of silence to be able to write those books. I mean, those are some mammoth books, and they died quite young.
Probably if you're sharing a bedroom with all these sisters all trying to write books at the same time.
Exactly.
It's probably pretty...
you're like, silence for God's sake.
Look, I've nearly finished my book, shut up, I need to finish. Did they live all in the same place?
I'm guessing so. I think their father was a priest, and they didn't have that much money.
Wow.
And, they all lived together. but they're all rather gloomy, let's say. Everything they wrote was rather gloomy.
There's a line in there, I don't know whether you can find it, which I really liked, which was about the feeling of a feeling of sadness or grief. Yeah, there it is. A tender grief.
That is not woe.
That is not woe. What does that mean, do you think? So deeper than... A deeper-seated grief than just feeling sorrow. Unhappy or sorrowful about something.
I think so too. Grief. And sometimes we grieve things that we don't even know, right? Sometimes you grieve things that you have not had. You grieve a future that you haven't had yet, you know. So maybe there was some kind of longing in her. That
do you ever have that feeling then when you just feel really sad?
Yes.
Like you feel you want to burst into tears, or you feel really unhappy but you don't know why.
Yeah.
I have that all the time.
Is that ennui?
Usually when I'm teaching my business class. No, sorry. No. But no, I do get that quite a lot, and I would have thought with age and experience I'd be much more aware of what it was, but actually I become less.
Interesting. Have you become more sensitive to these things?
Well, I think it's what's in your poem.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah.
That when you're younger, you feel sad because I've just hurt my knee, or because I didn't get, the sweets that I wanted. Whereas now, it's a deeper grief that is not woe. What is it? It's kind of like...
It's maybe the accumulation of all the things that happened in your life. In your life that you're like really grieving the things that haven't happened and the things that haven't happened that you wanted to happen.
It's like all that stuff that builds up at the bottom of the
exactly
of your jar or whatever, jar of liquid, and
it just bubbles up to the surface, and then you're very sad right there. Do you have that feeling sometimes when you listen to a certain song and it brings back with it the whole story?
Yeah. Some songs I can't listen to anymore because they have such an emotional connection, and writing songs. If I write songs, that usually there's some sort of emotional reason for writing it, and sometimes it can be so strong that I can't sing the song.
Okay.
I have to put the song away for a couple of weeks until the grief that is not woe has gone away, and then I can do it.
Okay.
But it's quite strong.
I find music to be extremely... I think I'm not the only one. Many people, maybe even everybody in the world, finds music extremely powerful in changing your mood. For me, if I'm feeling down and I really want to change my mood, which sometimes we don't. Sometimes we want to just wallow, don't we? We just want to wallow in our sorrow, in our woes.
So if you were feeling really down in the dumps, upset, sad, are you more likely to go home and put some happy music on to cheer you up, or are you going to put something really grim on just to reinforce your mood?
So it depends. That's what I'm saying. If I really want to get out of it, if I make that conscious decision to leave that hole, that dump, then I will put on some nice music and just like dance by myself in my bathroom. And that really, really does change my mood. But if I feel like, no, I've got to sit in this grief for a moment and I have got to really experience it all. Sometimes you really have to live it all out, and like go to the deepest.
So what's your go-to piece of music if you're feeling really grim and you want to continue feeling really sad?
It's interesting, because if it's a breakup, then I have a different set of songs, you know. And if it's, I don't know, if I'm missing someone, then there's this one Arabic song that I remember listening to back then when everybody that I loved was somewhere else and I was by myself in Aleppo, and I remember not just listening to it. Oh, and there's the other thing. There's this sadistic piece of it. It's like if I'm listening to it, I have to send it to other people to feel the same.
Oh no! Don't send it to me.
But it's this shared experience of like, look how, like, I have a very painful memory of when my parents divorced. And we had this shared experience, my siblings and I. We were very young, and we were listening to my mom's tapes, listening to all of her music, and just crying all together. It's like, why are we doing this to ourselves?
But there's something rather lovely about it.
Because misery loves company, doesn't it? And it's really kind of like, let's console each other by being sad together.
Yeah.
And I like that. That's part of the human experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like we don't want to suffer alone. We want to do it together.
Yeah.
But if I feel like, okay, now it's enough. Now I've wallowed and now I've lived it all. I've experienced it all. I feel Also suffering, feeling like the sadness is part of being human, isn't it? Like I was talking to one of our friends actually a long time ago, and he said, and this was very interesting, he said that he watched a movie in his, I don't know, late 30s or in his 40s, and he said if he had watched this in his 20s before his heart was broken, before all of the problems that he encountered later had happened, he would not have experienced it the same way. He would not have understood it, which is really interesting, isn't it? Because, and he was grateful for all the problems that had happened in his life that made him appreciate this movie now. And I find that very true.
Wow.
And if you think of it, like all the biggest pieces of art come from suffering.
Yeah.
Very few of them come from joy.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I mean, my my favourite music, like my favourite movies probably, are ones that hurt.
Yes.
I like sometimes to torture myself with music that is so sad.
Yeah.
So I have almost like my bucket list of songs to cry to, or songs that I know are going to choke me.
Yeah.
And they're wide ranges of stuff, and for different reasons too. At Christmas time, there are one or two Christmas carols that have such strong memories for me of when I was a little boy that I can't sing them anymore.
Wow.
It's so sad because it brings back so much about my youth. Samuel Barber, Adagio for Strings. That piece of music is a killer. It's a killer. Anybody who knows that piece will know what I'm talking about. So, if I'm really sad, put that on and I am I'm in a mess. There's a Scottish band called Blue Nile. Don't know if you've ever heard of them, probably not. Very ambient, but their songs are so... It's so
depressing.
Sad. Well, yeah, I love it. But in my previous relationships, if ever my partner came home and I was playing the Blue Nile, they knew I was not in a good mood. Oh, okay, what's wrong with you? Yeah. So no, really interesting.
I think that's very important, actually, that we feel our feelings, because a lot of people don't feel their feelings and they just bottle them up, and at some point they just lose their minds. They react so stupidly to small things, and you're like, whoa, where did this come from now?
Yeah.
And it's because they don't acknowledge their feelings, they don't sit with their feelings, they don't reflect, and they don't realize what's wrong with them.
Well, for me, it's only a modern occurrence, actually, for me.
Yeah.
Even 10 years ago, I would have absolutely bottled up anything that I felt. So I think it's only as I've got older that I've realised actually it's more healthy to, face up to your emotions and be, try and release them, try and address them. But as a child, my generation was very much the generation of, pick yourself up,
upper lip,
dust yourself down, carry on. Don't let anybody see any signs of weakness, because that's going to be damaging for you.
And was that just for the masculine or for both?
No, I mean, I think it's possibly because of my mother, but my mother was typical of her post-war generation. We've all had to suffer so much. You in your generation, you've got nothing to complain about. So whatever happens to you, you should just get on with it because you're lucky.
It's interesting.
And, I think there's a whole generation, my whole generation, were very heavily influenced by that. Margaret Thatcher, she was exactly the same, that sort of same mentality.
Yeah.
Interestingly, very feminine.
Yeah.
It wasn't a massive, it didn't come from the men, it came from the women.
Interesting. Because a part of me wants to say that this is what we teach boys, just man up and walk it off and don't show weakness, and why are you such a sissy? But you're saying that it's both men and women. Actually, you're saying it's coming more from the women.
I think more women do the you better man up sort of thing to boys than men do. Because I think men, or maybe it's just a more modern occurrence, I think men have become a lot wiser to the fact that men do have emotions too, and it is okay. And maybe living up to the male stereotype is not as essential as it was.
It's not helping anyone.
No.
It's like by denying your feelings, you're really hurting everyone around you, because all of a sudden you get really crazy and you might be violent. And I really firmly believe, some of it is testosterone, but a lot of it is bottled emotions that you don't know what to do with. And
domestic violence, of course, is a two-way thing, but of course it's primarily the male who is the perpetrator, and born largely, a lot of it, I'm sure, as you say, is to do with bottled up emotion or not knowing how to handle the emotion that you've got. and the only way you can, relieve any of that is the only way that is left open to you, which is to, resorting to violence, which is,
We're like, there's a part of me that wants to say, oh, we've veered off topic and this is not about silence anymore, but it's very much about silence, isn't it? Because you don't know how to talk about it. You just let it fester within you, and then boom, it just blows up in everybody's face.
It's being silent over things that you shouldn't be silent about. And sort of what we picked up on several times so far in the discussion, but I think so many times because of trauma or previous life events, things just get left unspoken because we don't want to have to tackle that same emotion again. For boys, I'm sure that's why there's so much aggressive behaviour when they're older, is just a mask for childhood trauma.
But I think a lot of it as well, a lot of the silence that we have is fear of being, rejected, misunderstood, labelled, whatever it is. There are so many times we want to say things, but we worry that they won't be received the right way, so we just keep them inside. But doesn't mean that we're not resentful. We still get resentful. We just don't know how to explain it.
Definitely living evidence of that. I mean, we talked in the past about, rejection is my number one failure. I hate being rejected, and silence is a key ingredient in rejection. You do something and you get no feedback.
Yes.
You think you've done something good, you don't get a positive response. You ask for affirmation or you ask for feedback and you don't get it. Are all forms of rejection. They're not active, but they feel like rejection, and they trigger the same emotional response to other forms of rejection. So I'm really, really susceptible to that.
Yeah.
I can feel it when it's happening.
Yeah, but I'm very happy to hear that you have now found a way around it and now you talk about things more. That's really healthy, and I'm very happy. I mean, as a woman who's very not emotional, but expressive, I've never had this issue. I never understood why people don't talk about things, but I do understand now that people find it sometimes very hard to say what plagues them and to lay things on the table, or sometimes to be even aware of it themselves. So, very nice.
Yeah, no, a breakthrough for me. I think, it's just important to have some people in your life where you feel comfortable enough that you can.
Absolutely. And
for people who don't, and I know plenty from my generation of friends at school who still live in the same sort of environment, and I just don't know what they're feeling emotionally because they don't give anything away. This is very sad, really.
Really, really sad. Such a shame indeed. So I know you have a nice poem that you found. That it's a longer one, but I'll be very happy to listen to it.
Yeah, I went hunting because you're so good at finding stuff to read. So I thought, let's see if I can find a good poem. And I hit upon this poem by a gentleman called Edgar Lee Masters, who was American and around late 1800s, lived till 1950. So relatively contemporary. But to be honest, I've never heard of him, never read his work before. What I do know is that he was an attorney. And he wasn't just a poet. So he wrote 15 novels.
Oh, wow.
21 books of poetry, 16 biographies.
Okay.
As well as being an attorney during the day. So he was clearly...
Very prolific
writer. But he died penniless in a pauper's grave. So I don't know what we make of that. But anyway. But he wrote this... aptly titled, given what our podcast is about, he wrote an aptly titled poem called Silence. And I was blown away by this because it beautifully summarised, I think, almost all the themes that we've talked about in the 2 episodes so far.
So this will be a nice way to wrap everything up.
Well, yeah, let's see if it says anything that we didn't talk about or whether we can use it as a tick list. But let me read it to you.
Go on.
Silence. I have known the silence of the stars and of the sea, and the silence of the city when it pauses, and the silence of a man and a maid, and the silence for which music alone finds the word, and the silence of the woods before the winds of spring begin, and the silence of the sick when their eyes roam about the room. And I ask, for the depth of what use is language? A beast of the field moans a few times when death takes its young, and we are voiceless in the presence of realities. We cannot speak. A curious boy asks an old soldier sitting in front of the grocery store, "How did you lose your leg?" And the old soldier is struck with silence, or his mind flies away because he cannot concentrate it on Gettysburg. It comes back jocosely and he says, "A bear bit it off." And the boy wonders, while the old soldier dumbly, feebly lives over the flashes of guns, the thunder of cannon, the shrieks of the slain, and himself lying on the ground, and the hospital surgeons, the knives, and the long days in bed. But if he could describe it all, he would be an artist. But if he were an artist, there would be deeper wounds which he could not describe. There is the silence of a great hatred, and the silence of a great love, and the silence of a deep peace of mind, and the silence of an embittered friendship. There is the silence of a spiritual crisis through which your soul, exquisitely tortured, comes with visions not to be uttered into a realm of higher life. And the silence of the gods who understand each other without speech. There is the silence of defeat. There is the silence of those unjustly punished, and the silence of the dying whose hand suddenly grips yours. There is the silence between father and son, when the father cannot explain his life, even though he be misunderstood for it. There is the silence that comes between husband and wife. There is the silence of those who have failed. And the vast silence that covers broken nations and vanquished leaders. There is the silence of Lincoln, thinking of the poverty of his youth, and the silence of Napoleon after Waterloo, and the silence of Jeanne d'Arc saying amid the flames, "Blessed Jesus," revealing in 2 words all sorrow, all hope. And there is the silence of age, too full of wisdom for the tongue to utter it in words intelligible to those who have not lived the great range of life. And there is the silence of the dead. If we who are in life cannot speak of profound experiences, why do you marvel that the dead do not tell you of death? Their silence shall be interpreted as we approach them.
Wow. I love this. And I really think it really summarizes everything we have talked about. I don't know if there's anything left to say. Maybe...
Yeah, I think... Thank you for coming up with the idea of silence as our first topic. Because when you first suggested it, it was like, how can we possibly talk about silence? We're never going to find anything. It is kind of ironic that we should start with it. But on this voyage of discovery, of trying to find things, I've learned so much. And I found a poet. I must read some more. But that poem really blew me away.
It is amazing.
Because it talks about all the things that we learned about from our Holocaust experience, all the things we've talked about in relationships, all the things we talked about.
Stunted relationships, stunted communication.
And this is all encapsulated in one single poem. I love it.
Well done, you.
Yeah.
So
do I get a prize then for that?
You do.
Awesome.
Let me think about it. So I think this concludes this episode then.
Yeah, I think we're done. I think that's really good. It's a good place to stop.
And next week we'll come back with a new topic. So I'll see you then.
Yeah, thank you for listening. And that was our 2 cents on silence.
Very good.
Okay, bye. We hope that you've enjoyed listening to the readings we chose for you today.
And that our musings have ignited your thoughts.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and those you think would enjoy it.
If you have any thoughts, suggestions, or any kind of feedback, please send us an email using the email in the show notes.
We'd love to hear from you with the words that make you.